5 men attacked a billionaire CEO inside his mansion. The Maid's hidden skill saved his life. Subscribe to The Maid's Secret for more stories. Don't risk missing the next story. Follow, comment, and share. Let's begin. The January wind howled against the windows of the Blackwood estate, carrying with it the promise of another snowstorm. Sofia Martinez moved silently through the West Wing, a shadow among shadows. For 3 years, she had perfected the art of invisibility within these walls of wealth and privilege. "Just another coat of polish on the banister, Mrs. Winters," she said quietly to the housekeeper, who barely glanced up from her clipboard. "Fine, Sophia, and Mr. Blackwood wants the Venetian vases rotated in the main hall. Something about the sunlight damaging the finish," Mrs. Winters replied, her voice carrying the practiced disinterest of someone who had spent decades managing the homes of the extremely wealthy. Sophia nodded. Though she knew Mr. Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Technologies, and worth an estimated $2 billion, according to last month's Forbes, had never once noticed the vases. He rarely noticed anything in his own home, least of all the 38-year-old woman who cleaned it. The mansion sprawled across 3 acres of Connecticut countryside, a monument to modern luxury with its floor-to-ceiling windows, heated marble floors, and security system that cost more than what Sophia would earn in 15 years. Yet for all its grandeur, the place felt hollow, a showroom rather than a home. As Sophia moved through the house with her cart of cleaning supplies, she maintained her routine with meticulous precision. The staff quarters were located in the East Wing, far from the main house where Mr. Blackwood conducted his business and entertained guests. Today, like most days, he was locked in his study, orchestrating mergers and acquisitions with the cold efficiency that had made him famous in the tech world. "Hey, Sophia," came a friendly voice. It was Jacob, the groundskeeper's son who helped with security on weekends. At 24, he was the youngest staff member and the only one who bothered to learn her name properly. "Nasty weather coming in. They're saying power might go out in some areas." Sophia smiled, the expression warming her otherwise serious face. "I've got candles ready in the staff wing. Always prepared, aren't you?" Jacob grinned. "Hey, did you hear? The boss has some big meeting tonight. Private dinner with investors or something. Mrs. Winters is freaking out." Sophia hadn't heard. No one told the maid about the comings and goings of the house unless it affected her cleaning schedule. "Thanks for the heads up," she said, mentally calculating which rooms would need priority attention. As Jacob walked away, Sophia's gaze drifted to the security panel near the kitchen entrance. Force of habit. She noted the green lights indicating all systems operational. The cameras, the motion sensors, the alarm connections, all functioning. Good. 3 years earlier, when Sophia first interviewed for this position, she had nearly walked out when she saw the security system. Too many cameras, too many potential triggers. But she had needed the job desperately, and the isolated location meant minimal contact with strangers. Sophia checked her watch. 4:30 p.m. Darkness would fall early, as it did during Connecticut winters. She quickened her pace, moving to the grand foyer with its imposing double staircase. As she polished the banister, she caught her reflection in one of the oversized mirrors. Dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, no makeup, the standard black and white uniform required of household staff, intentionally forgettable. Only her eyes betrayed something more, dark, alert, and constantly scanning. 8 years had passed since she had left the program, but some habits couldn't be unlearned. Some instincts couldn't be suppressed. "Sophia," came a voice that made her straighten immediately. It was Mr. Blackwood himself, a rare appearance outside his private spaces during working hours. "Yes, sir," she said, her eyes automatically lowering to the floor in the deferential manner expected of household staff. "The dining room needs to be immaculate tonight. Mrs. Winters is indisposed with planning the menu. See to it personally." His tone was clipped, distracted. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood." She risked a glance upward as he walked away. Elliot Blackwood was 45, with salt and pepper hair and the lean physique of a man who had private trainers and nutritionists at his disposal. Handsome in that generic way of the ultra-wealthy. Good tailoring and good dentistry creating an illusion of genetic superiority. She had cleaned his home for 3 years and could count on one hand the number of direct conversations they had shared. He had never asked her last name. Sophia moved to the dining room, a cavernous space dominated by a table that could seat 20. Through the windows, she could see the snow beginning to fall more heavily, blanketing the sculptured gardens in white. The security lights had already switched on, casting long shadows across the grounds. As she worked, Sophia's mind wandered to the locked drawer in her small staff bedroom. Inside was a worn leather case containing papers from another life, certification of completion from the Phoenix program, a specialized training initiative for survivors of domestic violence. For 6 months, she had lived in a secure compound, learning alongside 11 other women how to defend herself, how to disappear, how to start over. The skills had been practical rather than theatrical. Disarmament techniques, situational awareness, basic combat moves that could work despite size disadvantages. The psychological training had been equally important. How to remain calm when every instinct screamed for flight, how to assess threats rapidly, how to use an aggressor's momentum against them. Sophia had excelled in the program. "You have a natural aptitude for this," her instructor had told her. "You think 3 steps ahead." But that had been another life. Now she was just a maid with an impeccable employment record and references that highlighted her discretion and thoroughness. The perfect, invisible woman. By 7 p.m., the dining room gleamed with polished silver and crystal. Sophia had just finished adjusting the last place setting when she heard the distinct sound of cars pulling up the long driveway. "They're early," Mrs. Winters fretted, hurrying into the room. "Sophia, finish up quickly and make yourself scarce. Mr. Blackwood wants minimal staff presence tonight." Sophia nodded and gathered her supplies. As she slipped out through the service door, she caught a glimpse of the arriving guests. 5 men in expensive overcoats being greeted by Mr. Blackwood in the foyer. Something about their demeanor made her pause. They moved with a stiff formality, and despite the bitter cold, none unwrapped their scarves or removed their gloves immediately as most visitors did. Small details, probably nothing. Yet as Sophia made her way back to the staff wing, a familiar tension began building at the base of her skull. The same tension she had felt years ago, before her ex-husband came home in one of his moods. Before situations escalated. It was the feeling of wrongness, a primal warning system that had saved her life more than once. She hesitated at the junction between the main house and the staff wing. The rational choice was to return to her quarters as instructed. Instead, Sophia found herself turning back, moving silently along the service corridor that ran parallel to the main rooms of the house. There was a small pantry adjacent to the dining room, with a narrow window in its door, designed for staff to monitor the progress of meals discreetly. Sophia positioned herself there, her view partially obscured but adequate to observe the table. Mr. Blackwood sat at the head, with the 5 men arranged around him. They had removed their coats, but not their suit jackets, unusual for a dinner meeting. One man, bald with a close-cropped beard, seemed to be doing most of the talking. Mr. Blackwood's expression grew increasingly tense. No food had been served yet. The conversation was clearly not going well. Sophia couldn't hear the words, but she recognized the body language, the slight forward lean of the visitors, the way they subtly blocked the exits with their chair positions, the controlled gestures that suggested suppressed energy rather than relaxation. These were not investors. As if confirming her suspicion, the bald man suddenly stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He reached inside his jacket. Sophia's heart hammered. She needed to alert security, to call the police. She backed away from the pantry door and pulled out her phone. That's when the lights went out. A moment later, the emergency generator kicked in, but Sophia already knew what this meant. Someone had cut the main power. The security system would revert to backup mode, which bought them perhaps 15 minutes before the cellular connections would need to recalibrate. A scream pierced the darkness. followed by the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. Sophia moved instinctively toward the noise, her body remembering what her conscious mind had tried to forget. In the semi-darkness, she navigated to the kitchen, where she knew the cooking staff would be preparing the meal. She found them huddled in confusion. "Stay here," she commanded, with an authority that made them stare. "Lock the door behind me." Before they could question her, Sophia grabbed a knife from the magnetic strip on the wall and a heavy rolling pin. She slipped back into the corridor, adrenaline sharpening her senses to painful clarity. More shouting echoed from the dining room, followed by a crash. Sophia moved closer, keeping to the shadows. Through the partially open door, she could see that the situation had devolved completely. Two of the men had Mr. Blackwood pinned to the wall. The bald man stood in front of him, a gun pointed casually at the billionaire's chest. The other two were ransacking the room, pulling paintings from walls and upending furniture. "You really thought we wouldn't find out?" the bald man was saying, his voice eerily calm. "You really thought you could just walk away from what you did?" Mr. Blackwood's face was ashen. "I don't know what you're talking about." The blow came swiftly, the butt of the gun striking Mr. Blackwood's temple, sending him slumping between his captors. 16 years, the bald man continued, as if there had been no interruption. 16 years I've waited for this moment. Do you even remember her name? Do you even remember Lydia? Sophia assessed the situation rapidly. 5 attackers, at least 2 armed that she could see. Mr. Blackwood injured but conscious. The nearest panic button was in the corridor behind her, but pressing it would achieve little with the security system compromised. The nearest house phone was in the butler's pantry, just 10 feet away. If she could reach it, call the police. One of the men searching the room suddenly looked up, directly at the door where Sophia stood partially concealed. "Hey!" he shouted. "Someone's there!" Sophia didn't hesitate. As the man lunged toward the door, she burst through it, swinging the rolling pin with all her strength. It connected with his forearm with a sickening crack, the gun he'd been reaching for clattering to the floor. Chaos erupted. Sophia kicked the fallen weapon under the heavy dining table as another attacker charged toward her. She sidestepped, using his momentum to send him crashing into the china cabinet. The remaining 3 men froze momentarily in shock, clearly not expecting resistance, certainly not from a maid. Sophia used that split second to assess her position. The curtain rod above the nearest window was brass and decorative, sturdy enough for what she needed. With one fluid motion, she pulled the knife from her pocket and threw it at the curtain's support, causing the heavy fabric and rod to come crashing down. She caught the rod mid-air, just as the bald man raised his gun toward her. "Don't move," he ordered, his voice deadly quiet. Sophia stood perfectly still, the brass rod held loosely at her side. Her eyes met Mr. Blackwood's, seeing the confusion and fear there. She gave him the slightest nod, a promise. "Put it down," the bald man said, gesturing to the rod with his gun. Sophia slowly bent, as if to comply. Then, with a speed that surprised even her, she swung the rod upward, knocking the gun aside as a shot rang out, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling. Using the continued momentum, she brought the rod down on his wrist, forcing him to drop the weapon. What followed was a blur of movement, techniques performed not through conscious thought, but muscle memory. Sophia moved with precision and economy, each strike calculated for maximum efficiency. She used the heavy curtain that had fallen to tangle one attacker, the rod to disarm another. When one of the men grabbed her from behind, she went limp for a split second before driving her heel into his instep and her elbow into his solar plexus. As he doubled over, she twisted free. Mr. Blackwood had not remained idle. Despite his injury, he had managed to grab a heavy silver candlestick and was swinging it wildly at one of the attackers. His technique was poor, but his desperation made up for his lack of training. The bald man, having recovered his gun, aimed again. Not at Sophia this time, but at Mr. Blackwood. Sophia didn't think. She launched herself forward, sweeping the rod in an arc that connected with the man's knees. As he fell, she was on him, using a simple but effective hold she had learned years ago. The gun discharged again, harmlessly into the wall. In the distance, sirens wailed. Someone, perhaps the kitchen staff, perhaps Jacob, had managed to call the police. Two of the attackers were unconscious. One was pinned under the weight of the fallen china cabinet. Another was struggling with the curtain that Sophia had tangled around him. The bald man was subdued beneath her, though his eyes burned with a hatred that made her skin crawl. "Who are you, Mr.?" Blackwood gasped, staring at Sophia as though seeing her for the first time. Before she could answer, the room filled with police officers, their weapons drawn, shouting commands that echoed in the chaos of the destroyed dining room. Sophia slowly raised her hands, still gripping the brass curtain rod that had served her so well. As the officers secured the scene, checking the attackers and radioing for medical assistance, Mr. Blackwood continued to stare at her in disbelief. "Martinez," one officer said, reading the name tag on her uniform. "You did this?" Sophia's gaze remained locked with her employer's. "My name is Sophia Reyes," she said quietly. "And you have a lot of explaining to do, Mr. Blackwood." The billionaire's face drained of what little color remained. "Reyes," he whispered, the name clearly triggering some recognition. In that moment, as the police began taking statements and paramedics attended to the injured, Sophia realized that her carefully constructed life had just shattered. Whatever connection existed between her real surname and the attack tonight would soon come to light. The CCTV footage would be reviewed. Questions would be asked about her training. Her past would be excavated. The invisible woman had suddenly become the center of attention. As a paramedic dabbed at the cut on Mr. Blackwood's temple, he never took his eyes off Sophia. "Who are you?" he asked again, this time with a different inflection, not bewilderment but dawning comprehension. Sophia straightened her disheveled uniform, dignity returning with the familiar motion. "That depends," she answered, her voice steady, "on how much you remember about what happened in Seattle 16 years ago." Mr. Blackwood's sharp intake of breath confirmed what Sophia had suspected when she heard the bald man mention the time frame. Whatever had happened 16 years ago, whatever had driven these men to risk everything for revenge, Mr. Blackwood remembered it perfectly well. And somehow, though she didn't yet understand how, Sophia was connected to it all. As the police led the last of the attackers away, the bald man turned to look at her, his expression changing from rage to confusion to something else. Recognition. "You're her daughter," he said, the words barely audible over the commotion. "You're Lydia's daughter." And with those words, Sophia felt the foundations of her carefully constructed life crumble completely. The police station hummed with fluorescent lights and hushed conversations. Sophia sat alone in an interview room, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. Her uniform, normally pristine, bore the evidence of the night's violence. A torn sleeve, smudges of blood that wasn't hers. 3 hours had passed since the attack. 3 hours of repeating her statement, explaining her actions, carefully omitting certain details about her past training while emphasizing others. Yes, she had taken self-defense classes. No, she had never met the attackers before. No, she had no idea why they had targeted Mr. Blackwood. The last part wasn't entirely true. The name Lydia hung in her mind like a ghost. The door opened, and Detective Meredith Walsh entered carrying a manila folder. In her 50s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, Walsh had been handling the case since their arrival at the station. "Ms. Reyes," she said, emphasizing the surname Sophia had revealed. "We've reviewed the security footage. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it." Sophia remained silent. "5 armed men," Walsh continued, taking a seat across from her. "And you took them down with a curtain rod and what the report describes as exceptional tactical awareness. Care to elaborate on where a housekeeper learns skills like that?" Sophia met her gaze steadily. "I told you. After my divorce, I took intensive self-defense training." "The Phoenix program," Walsh nodded. "We checked. It exists. Specialized training for survivors of domestic violence. Unusual, but legitimate." She paused. What's unusual is finding a graduate working as a maid for Elliot Blackwood, of all people. It was just a job, Sophia said quietly. Walsh's expression softened slightly. Was it? Because the man in custody, Malcolm Reeves, seems to think you're connected to someone named Lydia, and Mr. Blackwood's reaction to your last name suggests he thinks so too. Sophia's hands tightened around the coffee cup. Detective, I've been cooperative. I've given my statement. Unless you're charging me with something, you're not under arrest, Ms. Reyes. You acted in defense of your employer and yourself. Walsh leaned forward. But you're in the middle of something much bigger than a home invasion. These men weren't random attackers. They targeted Blackwood specifically, and now it seems you might not be a random employee either. Before Sophia could respond, there was a knock at the door. A young officer poked his head in. Detective, Mr. Blackwood's attorney is here. They're demanding to speak with Ms. Reyes. Walsh sighed. Privilege and power work fast, don't they? She stood up. This conversation isn't over, Ms. Reyes. Whatever you're not telling me, I will find out. As Walsh left, Sophia closed her eyes briefly, centering herself the way she'd been taught years ago. When the door opened again, she was composed, her face a careful mask. The man who entered wasn't who she expected. Instead of a lawyer in an expensive suit, it was Elliot Blackwood himself, his temple now properly bandaged, his clothing changed from the bloodied dinner attire to casual but still undoubtedly costly attire. My attorney is handling the paperwork to get you released to my custody, he said without preamble. Unless you'd prefer to remain here. Sophia regarded him coolly. That depends on whether you're going to tell me the truth about Lydia. Blackwood flinched visibly at the name. He took the seat Detective Walsh had vacated, his movements betraying his physical discomfort. You said your name is Sophia Reyes, he began carefully. Not Martinez. Martinez was my married name. I went back to Reyes after the divorce. And before that, what was your mother's name? Sophia's pulse quickened. You know perfectly well what her name was. Lydia Reyes. Blackwood's composure slipped, revealing raw emotion beneath. I didn't know she had a daughter. I didn't know she was... He stopped, collecting himself. How much do you know? Less than you think, Sophia admitted. My mother never spoke about her past. She died when I was 17. Cancer. Fast and brutal. In her final days, delirious with pain medication, she mentioned Seattle, a man named Elliot, and that she should have fought harder. Sophia leaned forward. For years, I thought she was rambling. Then I saw your name in the paper, tech billionaire Elliot Blackwood. I did some research and applied to work in my house. Blackwood's voice was flat. Why? I wanted to know who you were, what you meant to my mother, why she spoke your name with such complicated emotion. A heavy silence fell between them. Through the window in the door, Sophia could see Detective Walsh watching their interaction with sharp interest. I didn't recognize your surname immediately tonight, Blackwood finally said. It's been 16 years, and Reyes isn't uncommon. But when you mentioned Seattle, he shook his head. How long were you planning to work for me without revealing who you were? As long as necessary, Sophia answered honestly. But I never expected those men to attack you. I never expected to hear my mother's name from a stranger holding a gun to your head. Her eyes narrowed. Who was Malcolm Reeves to my mother? What happened in Seattle 16 years ago? Blackwood's gaze dropped to his hands. It's not a simple story, Ms. Reyes. I just saved your life. I think I've earned the complicated version. Before he could respond, the door opened again. A tall woman in an impeccable suit entered, her expression professionally blank. Mr. Blackwood, everything's arranged. We can leave now. She glanced at Sophia. Ms. Reyes, I'm Julia Harrington, Mr. Blackwood's attorney. You're free to go, but the police will need you to remain available for further questioning. Sophia stood up. Where am I supposed to go? I live on Mr. Blackwood's property. That's been considered, Harrington replied smoothly. Arrangements have been made for you at the Wentworth Hotel until this situation is resolved. No, Blackwood interrupted, surprising both women. Sophia comes back to the estate. The guest house in the North Garden should be prepared for her. Harrington's professional veneer cracked slightly. "Sir, considering the circumstances are that Ms. Reyes saved my life," Blackwood cut in, "and that we have a lot to discuss. Privately." The attorney's lips thinned, but she nodded. "As you wish. The car is waiting." The ride back to the estate was silent. Sophia watched the winter landscape pass by, her mind racing with questions. The guest house Blackwood had mentioned was a small, elegant structure she had cleaned but never stayed in, reserved for visitors too important for hotels but not close enough to warrant a room in the main house. When they arrived, the mansion was still a crime scene, police vehicles parked along the circular driveway. Blackwood instructed the driver to take them directly to the guest house, bypassing the main building entirely. Inside, the space had been hastily prepared, lights on, heat running against the winter chill. It was larger than Sophia had remembered from cleaning it, with a sitting room, bedroom, and small kitchenette. "There are clothes in the wardrobe," Blackwood said awkwardly. "Mrs. Winters arranged it. Nothing fancy, but better than—" He gestured at her ruined uniform. Sophia nodded but made no move toward the bedroom. Instead, she stood in the center of the sitting room, waiting. Blackwood sighed heavily and lowered himself onto one of the armchairs. "You want answers. I understand that, but this isn't just my story to tell." "Start with Malcolm Reeves," Sophia insisted, remaining standing. "He recognized me somehow, said I was her daughter." "How did he know my mother?" Blackwood's face darkened. "Malcolm Reeves was my business partner in Seattle before Blackwood Technologies became what it is today. We were a small startup then, working on a security software platform." He paused. "Your mother was our lead programmer." This was new information. Sophia had known her mother worked in tech before she was born, but the specifics had never been shared. "Lydia was brilliant," Blackwood continued, his voice softening with memory. "She wrote code that was years ahead of what anyone else was doing. Our breakthrough, the algorithm that eventually became the foundation of my company, that was primarily her work. And yet somehow you're the billionaire, and she died in a small apartment in Arizona, working as a community college instructor," Sophia said coldly. Blackwood's expression tightened with what might have been guilt. "It's not that simple. There was an incident, a government contract, a disagreement about how our technology would be used." He met her eyes directly. "Your mother wanted to pull the plug on the whole project when she realized the military applications. Malcolm and I disagreed. So you what, forced her out? We bought her shares. It was all legal." The defensiveness in his tone told Sophia there was more to the story. "She took the money and disappeared. I tried to find her to explain, but she was gone." Sophia processed this information against the fragments she knew of her childhood, the frequent moves, her mother's reluctance to use computers at home, despite teaching programming, the way she had sometimes stared out windows with a faraway look, as though watching for someone. "That doesn't explain why Malcolm Reeves tried to kill you tonight," she pointed out. "If he was your partner, if you both pushed my mother out together, why would he wait 16 years to take revenge?" Blackwood shifted uncomfortably. "After Lydia left, the company took off. The government contract led to others. We expanded rapidly. But Malcolm and I had different visions for the future." He sighed. 5 years in, I bought him out too, not as generously as we had compensated your mother. And he resented that. Apparently more than I realized." Blackwood touched his bandaged temple gingerly. "But that doesn't explain why he mentioned Lydia, or why he recognized you." Sophia moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered gardens. The police lights still flashed in the distance near the main house. "You're leaving something out," she said without turning around. "Something important about what happened in Seattle." The silence stretched so long that Sophia thought Blackwood might refuse to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Lydia and I were involved, romantically. It ended badly when the business dispute happened." Sophia turned to face him. "Were you my father?" The bluntness of the question seemed to shock him. "No," he answered quickly. "No, that's not possible. Lydia and I, Our relationship ended before you could have been conceived." Something in his expression made Sophia doubt the certainty of his denial, but before she could press further, her phone rang, Detective Walsh's number flashing on the screen. "Ms. Reyes," Walsh said when Sophia answered. "Malcolm Reeves is asking to speak with you. Only you. Says he has information about your mother that you should hear." Sophia's eyes met Blackwood's across the room. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at the station." Walsh paused. "Whatever game you and Blackwood are playing, I suggest you come clean before it gets worse." After hanging up, Sophia relayed the message. Blackwood's face had gone pale. "Don't go," he said immediately. "Malcolm is manipulative. Whatever he tells you will be calculated to turn you against me." "And why would that concern you so much?" Sophia challenged. "I'm just your housekeeper, remember?" Blackwood stood with effort, wincing at the movement. "Get some rest, Ms. Reyes. We'll talk more tomorrow." He headed for the door, but paused with his hand on the knob. "For what it's worth, your mother was right to oppose us. I realized that too late." After he left, Sophia sank onto the couch, the adrenaline of the night finally giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. On the coffee table, a framed photo caught her attention, one she hadn't noticed earlier. It showed a younger Elliot Blackwood with his arm around a woman whose features Sophia knew intimately from photographs and memories. Lydia Reyes, her mother. Their smiling faces contradicted the tense story Blackwood had just shared. They looked happy, hopeful, standing in front of a small office with a hand-painted sign, "Blackwood Reeves Security Solutions." Sophia picked up the frame, studying her mother's face. What secrets had Lydia taken to her grave? And why, after all these years, had they erupted so violently into the present? Tomorrow, she would meet Malcolm Reeves and hear his version of events. Tomorrow, perhaps, she would begin to understand the truth about her mother and herself. Sleep had evaded Sophia. She'd spent the night poring over the photograph, searching for clues in her mother's smile, in the way she leaned slightly toward Blackwood. By morning, the image had revealed nothing new, but Sophia's resolve had solidified. She dressed in the clothes Mrs. Winters had provided, simple jeans and a sweater that fit surprisingly well, and left the guest house just as dawn broke over the snow-covered estate. A car was already waiting. "Mr. Blackwood arranged for me to drive you, ma'am," the driver explained, opening the door. Sophia hadn't seen this man before. He wasn't part of the regular household staff. "Did he give you instructions to report back on my conversations?" she asked bluntly. The driver's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "Just to ensure your safety, ma'am." "I can ensure my own safety," Sophia replied. But she got into the car nonetheless. The police station was too far to walk in the bitter January cold. Detective Walsh was waiting when she arrived, a coffee in hand and dark circles under her eyes, suggesting she'd had as little sleep as Sophia. "I've arranged a supervised interview," Walsh explained, leading Sophia through the station. "Reeves is still in custody, facing multiple serious charges. He's not going anywhere, but his attorney has advised against this meeting. The fact that he's insisting on it anyway makes me curious." "Makes two of us," Sophia murmured. The interview room was small and sterile. Malcolm Reeves sat at the metal table, his hands cuffed in front of him. In the harsh fluorescent lighting, he looked older than he had during the attack, lines etched deeply around his mouth and eyes, his bald head sporting a bandage where Sophia had struck him with the curtain rod. "You look like her," were his first words as Sophia took a seat across from him. "Same eyes, same way of holding yourself, careful, watchful." Sophia said nothing, simply waiting. Reeves leaned forward, his chains clinking against the table. "Did Blackwood tell you how your mother died?" The question caught Sophia off guard. "Cancer. Pancreatic. I was with her." A strange expression crossed Reeves's face, something between disappointment and relief. "So she really did die naturally. I wasn't sure whether to believe the reports." "Reports?" Sophia frowned. "You were tracking my mother." "Not me personally, but yes. After she disappeared, certain parties kept tabs on her whereabouts." And his eyes narrowed. "What did Blackwood tell you about Seattle? about what happened 16 years ago. Sophia chose her words carefully, aware of Walsh watching through the one-way glass. He said you were business partners, that my mother was your lead programmer, that there was a disagreement over a government contract. Reeves gave a bitter laugh. A disagreement. That's one way to put it. He leaned back in his chair. Did he mention Project Oracle? Did he tell you what your mother actually discovered? Sophia shook her head slowly. Project Oracle was supposed to be a security platform, Reeves continued, designed to identify potential threats by analyzing patterns across multiple databases. Your mother wrote the core algorithms. Beautiful work, truly. His expression darkened. But when the military got involved, they wanted more. They didn't just want to identify existing threats. They wanted prediction, preemptive identification. Pre-crime, Sophia said, the reference slipping out. Essentially, yes. Your mother realized the ethical implications immediately, the potential for abuse, for targeting innocent people based on probability models. Reeves sighed heavily. I didn't see it then. I saw dollar signs and government contracts stretching into the future. Blackwood and I, we pressured her to continue. Sophia's mind flashed to her mother's quiet but firm moral code, how she'd taught Sophia that technological capability never absolved ethical responsibility. She refused. She did more than refuse, Reeves said, leaning forward again. She sabotaged the project, inserted a fatal flaw in the code that wouldn't be discovered until after deployment. By then, she planned to have gone public with her concerns. This aligned with what Sophia knew of her mother, gentle but unyielding when her principles were at stake. What happened? Blackwood discovered what she'd done. Reeves' voice dropped lower. He confronted her privately. I don't know exactly what was said, but the next day she was gone. Her apartment cleaned out, her accounts emptied. Blackwood told me she'd agreed to a confidential settlement and signed an ironclad NDA. His chains rattled as he gestured. I believed him. We fixed her sabotage, delivered the project and built an empire on it. Sophia struggled to keep her expression neutral. If that's true, why wait 16 years for revenge? Why now? Reeves' eyes took on a haunted quality. Because I only recently discovered what really happened that night. He glanced at the mirrored window. I found Blackwood's private files. There was an altercation between them. It got physical. Reeves hesitated. He threatened her, not just legally, but personally. Said he'd destroy her reputation, make sure she never worked in tech again. Said he'd report her to federal authorities for sabotaging a national security project. That doesn't match the photograph I found, Sophia countered, describing the picture from the guest house. They looked happy together. Of course they did. They were engaged at that point. Sophia felt the air leave her lungs. Engaged? For nearly a year. The ring wasn't flashy, neither of them were rich then, but she never took it off. Reeves studied her reaction. He didn't tell you that part, did he? That he and your mother were planning to marry? Sophia's mind raced to recalibrate what she thought she knew. Her mother had never mentioned an engagement, never spoken of a great love lost. But there had been moments, a wistfulness when passing jewelry stores, a reflexive touch to her left ring finger when deep in thought. If what you're saying is true, she said carefully, why attack Blackwood now? What changed? Project Oracle changed, Reeves replied. It evolved. What started as military technology has become something much more invasive. Blackwood Technologies now supplies predictive security algorithms to everyone from intelligence agencies to private corporations. The ethical concerns your mother raised have only grown more relevant. His expression hardened. And I found evidence that Blackwood knew about these problems from the beginning. He buried studies, silenced critics, including your mother. Silenced how? Sophia pressed. The NDA she signed included a blacklisting provision, informal but effective. She couldn't work in her field again without his recommendation, which he withheld. Reeves shook his head. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know until I found the files. By then, Blackwood had already forced me out too. I spent years rebuilding, nursing my grudge. When I learned what he'd done to Lydia, his hands clenched into fists. I wasn't thinking clearly. So you assembled a team to what? Kill him? Sophia's voice hardened. How does that honor my mother's memory? It wasn't supposed to be violent, Reeves insisted, looking genuinely distressed. We were going to confront him, force him to admit what he'd done, record it, go public with the truth about Project Oracle and its victims. He sighed heavily, but emotions ran high. One of my team had a brother who was wrongfully detained based on Oracle's predictions. Another lost his career. Things escalated. Sophia studied him, trying to separate truth from manipulation. These files you claim to have found, where are they now? Secured, Reeves said firmly. Multiple copies, multiple locations. If anything happens to me, they go public automatically. Detective Walsh chose that moment to enter the room. Time's up, Ms. Reyes. Reeves spoke quickly before Sophia could stand. Ask Blackwood about the flash drive, the one Lydia always wore around her neck. Ask him what was on it. Sophia froze. Her mother had indeed worn a small silver flash drive as a pendant, something Sophia had assumed was merely sentimental, a quirk of a programmer. After her mother's death, Sophia had kept it among her few precious mementos, never thinking to check its contents. Ms. Reyes, Walsh prompted, holding the door open. As Sophia rose to leave, Reeves called after her. Lydia deserved better, from both of us, but especially from him. Outside in the hallway, Walsh fixed Sophia with a penetrating stare. Want to tell me what that was really about? Sophia shook her head. Family history, complicated. Complicated enough for 5 men to risk decades in prison. Walsh folded her arms. Blackwood Technologies is no small player, Ms. Reyes. They have government contracts, security clearances. If there's something I should know, I don't have answers for you yet, Detective, Sophia interrupted. But when I do, you'll be the first to know. Walsh seemed unconvinced, but nodded. Reeves and his team aren't going anywhere. Neither is this investigation. As Sophia left the station, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car unavailable. Taking Uber back? It was signed simply EB. Sophia ignored it, instead walking to a nearby coffee shop. She needed space to think, to process what she'd learned. Inside, she ordered a black coffee and found a quiet corner table. 2 very different narratives were emerging. In Blackwood's version, he and her mother had a business and personal falling out that ended with a legal settlement and her voluntary departure. In Reeves's telling, Blackwood had threatened and blacklisted Lydia, forcing her into hiding and a diminished life. Neither story fully aligned with what Sophia remembered of her childhood. Her mother had never seemed bitter or defeated. Cautious, yes. Private about her past, certainly. But she had built a modest but dignified life, teaching computer science at a community college, raising Sophia with quiet strength. Yet there had been those moments. The startled fear when strangers approached too quickly, the reluctance to have her photograph taken, the way she taught Sophia to always know the exits in any room. Sophia pulled out her phone and searched for Blackwood Technologies Project Oracle. The results were mostly promotional materials about enterprise security solutions and vague references to pattern recognition technology. Nothing about military applications or predictive policing. A deeper search for academic critiques of predictive policing algorithms yielded more interesting results. Several papers mentioned concerns about false positives, racial bias, and constitutional questions. None specifically named Blackwood's company, but the ethical issues aligned with what Reeves had described. The coffee shop door chimed as a new customer entered. Sophia glanced up automatically and froze. Jacob, the young security guard from the estate, was approaching her table. "Ms. Reyes," he said politely, "Mr. Blackwood was concerned when you didn't respond to his message." "So he sent you to track me down?" Sophia asked coolly. Jacob had the grace to look embarrassed. "He thought you might be more comfortable with me than with his regular security team." "And how did you find me?" "Your phone," Jacob admitted. "All staff devices have tracking enabled." It's in the employment contract. Sophia remembered signing that contract 3 years ago, desperate for work, for anonymity. She hadn't questioned the invasive clause then. "Tell Mr. Blackwood I'll return when I'm ready," she said firmly. Jacob hesitated. "He also wanted me to give you this." He handed her a small USB drive. "He said you'd want to see what's on it." Sophia took the drive, turning it over in her palm. "What is it?" "I don't know. He just said it was important." Jacob shifted uncomfortably. "For what it's worth, I've never seen him like this. After what happened, he's different, shaken." After Jacob left, Sophia stared at the drive, debating whether to trust its contents. Finally, curiosity won out. She ordered another coffee and pulled out her laptop, a personal device, not company-issued. The drive contained a single video file dated 16 years earlier. Sophia inserted her earbuds and pressed play. The footage was grainy security camera video without audio. It showed a small office, recognizable as the one from the photograph. 2 figures were arguing heatedly, a younger Elliot Blackwood and her mother. Sophia watched, transfixed, as the silent confrontation unfolded. Though she couldn't hear the words, the body language was clear. Blackwood gesturing emphatically. Her mother standing firm, shaking her head repeatedly. Blackwood running his hands through his hair in frustration. Then something changed. Her mother turned as if to leave. Blackwood grabbed her arm. She pulled away sharply. He blocked her path to the door. Sophia's breath caught as she saw fear flash across her mother's face, a fear she recognized from her own marriage before she'd found the strength and resources to leave. The video ended abruptly, cutting to black mid-confrontation. Sophia sat back, her coffee forgotten. The partial footage revealed enough to support aspects of Reeves's story, but not the full truth. Had Blackwood sent this to manipulate her perception, or as a gesture of transparency? Her phone buzzed again with another text from Blackwood. "There's more you need to see. Come back to the estate." Sophia closed her laptop and gathered her things. Whether Blackwood was villain or victim in this story remained unclear, but one thing was certain: the answers she sought were at the estate. As she stepped outside, ready to hail a cab, she noticed a black sedan parked across the street. The driver was watching her intently through tinted windows. Not Jacob, not police. Someone else was interested in her movements. Sophia turned and walked briskly in the opposite direction, using the evasion techniques she'd learned years ago. Whoever was following her was about to discover that the maid, who had disappeared into the background for 3 years, was in fact very good at disappearing when she wanted to. She had an estate to return to, but she would do so on her terms, and without leading anyone else to Blackwood's door. Sophia took a circuitous route back to the estate, switching transportation methods twice and doubling back to ensure she wasn't followed. By the time she approached the ornate gates, afternoon shadows stretched across the snow-covered grounds. Security had been visibly enhanced since the attack. 2 guards now manned the entrance, and she spotted cameras that hadn't been there before. They recognized her immediately and waved her through with a deference that felt strange after 3 years of near invisibility. Instead of heading to the guest house, Sophia made her way directly to the main mansion. She needed answers, not more fragments of truth designed to shape her perception. Mrs. Winters intercepted her in the foyer, the housekeeper's typically composed demeanor showing cracks of genuine concern. "Sophia, Ms. Reyes," she corrected herself. "Mr. Blackwood has been asking for you. He's in his study." She hesitated. "The police have finished with the dining room, but it's still in quite a state." "Thank you, Mrs. Winters." Sophia paused. "How long have you worked for Mr. Blackwood?" 12 years, the housekeeper replied, "since he moved east from Seattle." "Did you ever hear him mention someone named Lydia Reyes?" Mrs. Winters's expression shifted subtly. "That's not my place to say, Ms. Reyes." Which meant yes, Sophia realized. "Did you know who I was when I was hired?" "Again, not my place." Mrs. Winters straightened her already impeccable posture. "Mr. Blackwood is waiting." The study was located in the East Wing, a wood-paneled sanctuary Blackwood rarely left during working hours. Sophia had cleaned it countless times, always under strict instructions, never to disturb any papers or devices. She knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. Blackwood sat behind his massive desk, looking smaller than she remembered. His injuries from the attack were more visible in daylight. The bandage at his temple, the bruising along his jaw, the careful way he held himself to minimize pain. "You saw the video," he said immediately. Sophia remained standing near the door. "I saw a fragment, conveniently cut before whatever happened next." "There is no next," Blackwood replied. "The security system glitched. Something Lydia herself had arranged, I suspect. But yes, I was honest about that much at least. We argued. Things got heated." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Sophia ignored the invitation. "Malcolm Reeves tells a different story. He says you threatened my mother, blacklisted her from the industry." A flash of anger crossed Blackwood's face. Malcolm was always selective with the truth, especially when it paints him as a hero. He sighed heavily. "Yes, I threatened legal action. Yes, I was furious about the sabotage, but I never—" He stopped, reconsidering. "I wasn't the man I should have been. I put profit and ambition ahead of ethics, ahead of her concerns, which were valid." "So what actually happened? Why did she leave Seattle so suddenly?" Blackwood's gaze dropped to his desk, where a small framed photo sat, the same image Sophia had found in the guest house. "She left because I gave her no choice, because I couldn't see beyond the contracts and the money and my own ambition." Sophia moved closer to the desk, her patience wearing thin. "Stop speaking in generalities. Tell me exactly what happened that night." "I discovered she had deliberately compromised Project Oracle's core functionality," Blackwood said, his voice flat. "She had inserted safeguards that would prevent the system from being used for preemptive targeting. When confronted, she didn't deny it. She was proud of it. Said she couldn't be part of creating a system that would inevitably be abused." He looked up at Sophia. She was right, of course, but at the time, all I saw was millions in government contracts at risk. "So you threatened her?" "I told her she'd violated her contract, that she could be prosecuted for sabotaging a national security project." His expression tightened with what looked like genuine regret. "I threatened to make sure she never worked in the industry again unless she fixed what she'd done." Sophia felt cold anger spreading through her chest. "And the engagement? Reeves mentioned you were planning to marry." Blackwood's hand moved unconsciously to touch the photo. "Yes, for almost a year, another casualty of my short-sightedness." He met Sophia's gaze directly. "I didn't just lose a brilliant programmer that night. I lost the woman I loved because I couldn't see beyond my own ambition." "What happened after the confrontation?" "She walked out, disappeared completely. Emptied her accounts before I could freeze them. She was always 3 steps ahead." A hint of admiration colored his tone. "By the time I regretted my actions, tried to find her to apologize, she was gone. She changed her name, moved repeatedly. She didn't want to be found, especially by me." Sophia processed this information against her childhood memories, the frequent relocations, her mother's insistence on using cash whenever possible, the reluctance to create social media accounts. "She was afraid of you." "With reason," Blackwood admitted quietly. "I was ruthless then." "And Project Oracle? What happened to it?" "We fixed her sabotage, delivered as promised, built the company on its foundation." He gestured around him. "All this, built on technology your mother tried to stop because she foresaw its potential for misuse." Sophia remembered Reeves's claims about the system's evolution and expansion. "And has it been misused?" Blackwood's hesitation was answer enough. "There have been incidents, false positives, lives disrupted by algorithmic suspicion." He opened a drawer and pulled out a file. "Malcolm isn't entirely wrong about that. What he didn't tell you is that he was as complicit as I was, until I bought him out. His newfound ethics are convenient, now that he's no longer profiting from the technology." He pushed the file toward her. Sophia opened it to find news clippings and internal reports documenting cases where Project Oracle's predictive analytics had flagged innocent people, leading to investigations, detentions, ruined reputations. "My mother saw this coming," Sophia said, her voice hardening. She tried to prevent it. Yes. Blackwood's admission was simple but weighted with regret. When I finally understood what she had been trying to tell me, it was too late. The technology was deployed, integrated into systems worldwide, and you did nothing to stop it. I tried to implement safeguards, internal ethics boards, transparency initiatives. He gestured to the file. It wasn't enough. The genie was out of the bottle. Sophia closed the file, her thoughts turning to the flash drive Reeves had mentioned. My mother wore a flash drive as a necklace. Did you know what was on it? Blackwood's expression shifted subtly. I assumed it contained her copy of the original Oracle code, the ethical version she tried to preserve. He leaned forward. Do you have it? Somewhere, Sophia hedged, unwilling to reveal too much. I kept her personal effects after she died. If it contains what I think it does, it could be invaluable. There was an intensity to his voice that made Sophia wary. The original algorithms, before our modifications, they could help us implement the safeguards she envisioned, or help you protect yourself from whatever Malcolm Reeves is planning to reveal. Sophia countered. Blackwood didn't deny it. Malcolm's vendetta is personal. Yes, I forced him out unfairly. Yes, I've made serious ethical compromises, but his attack wasn't about justice. It was about revenge. And what is this about? Sophia gestured between them. Why tell me all this now? You had 3 years to recognize me, to tell me the truth about my mother. I didn't know who you were until you said your real name, Blackwood insisted. Martinez is common enough that I never made the connection to Reyes. He paused. Though perhaps subconsciously, I sensed something familiar in you. Why else would Mrs. Winters have hired you when your experience was minimal at best? Sophia remembered her job interview, how surprisingly easy it had been, despite her limited resume. Had some ghost of recognition influenced the decision? Or had Blackwood been subconsciously seeking atonement by employing the daughter of the woman he had wronged? Reeves mentioned that someone had been tracking my mother after she left Seattle, Sophia said. Was that you? Blackwood's expression confirmed her suspicion. I hired investigators, yes. Not to threaten her, to apologize, to try to make amends. They located her several times over the years, but I never approached. It was clear she had built a new life, one that didn't include me. His voice softened. The reports mentioned she had a daughter, but there was no father in the picture. I assumed, he trailed off, that she'd moved on, found someone else. Sophia filled in the blank. She never did, actually. There was never anyone serious after Seattle. Something like pain flashed across Blackwood's face. The investigators lost track of her about 10 years ago. I didn't know she had fallen ill. Didn't know she had died until... He gestured to Sophia. Until her daughter showed up to clean your house, she finished for him, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. I want to make this right, Blackwood said, straightening in his chair. Not just with you, but with the larger issue your mother identified. Project Oracle has evolved beyond what either Malcolm or I envisioned. It's embedded in systems worldwide. The potential for abuse has only grown. And what exactly do you think I can do about that? Sophia asked skeptically. If that flash drive contains what I think it does, your mother's original ethical framework for the technology, it could help us implement real safeguards. His voice took on an urgent quality. Help me fix what I broke, Sophia. Help me honor your mother's vision. Sophia studied him carefully, looking for signs of manipulation. What she saw instead was exhaustion, pain, and what appeared to be genuine remorse. I need time, she said finally. Time to process all this. Time to decide whether I believe you or Malcolm Reeves or neither of you. Blackwood nodded slowly. Of course. The guest house is yours for as long as you need it. He hesitated. But I should warn you, if Malcolm has gone public with his accusations as he threatened, things may get complicated. The company's attorneys, the board, government agencies, they'll all have questions for both of us. Let them ask, Sophia replied, turning to leave. One more thing, Blackwood called after her. When she paused at the door, he asked, Did your mother ever speak of me? In all those years? Sophia considered lying, then decided against it. Only at the end, when the pain medication made her confused, she would sometimes call out your name. She paused. I could never tell if it was in anger or longing. She left without waiting for his response, closing the door quietly behind her. Outside, the estate grounds were peaceful under their blanket of snow, belying the turmoil Sophia felt. She walked slowly toward the guest house, turning over everything she had learned. Two men who had once been partners, both claiming to honor her mother's memory while admitting to betraying her principles. A revolutionary technology gone awry, just as Lydia Reyes had predicted. And somewhere, a small silver flash drive that might contain the key to it all. Sophia's phone buzzed with a news alert. She opened it to find a breaking story. Tech billionaire Elliot Blackwood accused of ethical violations by former partner. So Reeves had made good on his threat. As she approached the guest house, Sophia noticed the door was slightly ajar, a door she distinctly remembered closing. She slowed her pace, senses heightening as they had during the attack. Someone had been there, might still be there. Sophia circled around to approach from the rear, moving silently across the snow. Through the kitchen window she could see signs of a hasty search. Drawers left open, cushions displaced, the flash drive. They were looking for the flash drive that wasn't even here. A twig snapped behind her. Sophia whirled, instinctively dropping into a defensive stance. A man stood several yards away, not one of Blackwood's security team. His expression registered surprise at her quick reaction, then determination as he reached inside his jacket. Ms. Reyes, he said, his voice calm and official. I'm Agent Carson, FBI. We need to talk about Project Oracle and your mother's role in its development. Sophia remained in her defensive posture, eyes fixed on his partially concealed hand. Show me identification, slowly. The man complied, revealing a badge that looked legitimate. But Sophia had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving. You can verify my credentials with your local police, he offered. Detective Walsh has been informed of our involvement. And breaking into my temporary residence? Is that standard FBI procedure? Sophia countered. Agent Carson had the grace to look uncomfortable. The situation required immediate action. Project Oracle is classified technology with national security implications. And what does that have to do with me? According to information we've received, you may possess critical data related to the original Oracle algorithm. His gaze was steady. Data that multiple parties are very interested in obtaining. Sophia thought of the flash drive, still safely stored in a security deposit box states away. Her mother's final insurance policy, preserved all these years without Sophia understanding its true significance. I want to speak with Detective Walsh, Sophia said firmly. And I want legal representation before answering any questions. Agent Carson nodded, seemingly unsurprised by her caution. That can be arranged. But Ms. Reyes, you should know. You've stepped into something much bigger than a family secret. This is about national security, private sector ethics, and technology that affects millions of lives daily. As if to emphasize his point, Sophia's phone buzzed again with another news alert. Blackwood Technologies shares plummet amid allegations of algorithmic bias and misuse. The digital ghosts of her mother's work were emerging from the shadows, forcing a reckoning 16 years in the making. And Sophia stood at the center of the storm, holding a key she hadn't known existed until now. I'm aware of the stakes, she told the agent calmly, which is exactly why I'll be proceeding carefully. Behind them, security lights flooded the area as Blackwood's team responded to the intrusion alert. In the main house, she could see lights coming on in the study. The confrontation her mother had tried to prevent 16 years ago was finally happening. But this time, Lydia's daughter was prepared to finish what she had started. The conference room at the FBI's field office was coldly functional. Grey walls, a long table, and the persistent hum of fluorescent lighting. Sophia sat at one end, flanked by Andrea Kemp, the attorney Blackwood had arranged for her. Across from them sat Agent Carson, Detective Walsh, and a Justice Department lawyer whose name Sophia had already forgotten. 24 hours had passed since the confrontation at the guest house. 24 hours of statements, questions, and carefully navigated legal territory. "Let me be clear," Agent Carson said, sliding a folder across the table. "Project Oracle has been integrated into critical security infrastructure nationwide. Any disruption to its functionality would have severe consequences." Sophia left the folder untouched. "I understand that. What I don't understand is why you're treating me like a hostile witness. I'm a victim in all this. Or have you forgotten that armed men attacked my employer's home? An employer who conveniently turned out to be connected to your mother," Walsh pointed out. "That's a coincidence that stretches credibility, Ms. Reyes." "I've already explained that," Sophia said calmly. "I recognized Blackwood's name from my mother's deathbed ramblings. I wanted to understand who he was to her. By working as his maid for 3 years, Walsh's skepticism was palpable. I needed work. His household needed staff. The position gave me proximity and anonymity while I figured things out." Sophia met Walsh's gaze steadily. "If I'd had some nefarious purpose, would I have saved his life during the attack?" Carson cleared his throat. "Let's focus on the matter at hand. Malcolm Reeves has made serious allegations about Project Oracle's ethical shortcomings and potentially illegal applications. He claims your mother created failsafes in the original code that were deliberately removed." "I don't know anything about the technical aspects," Sophia replied. "My mother never discussed her work in detail." "But you possess a storage device that belonged to her," Carson pressed. "A flash drive she wore as a necklace." Andrea Kemp intervened. "My client has already stated that she inherited personal effects from her mother, including jewelry. She has no knowledge of their contents or significance." "Ms. Reyes," the Justice Department lawyer spoke for the first time, "this is not just about corporate ethics or even your mother's legacy. Project Oracle has been used to prevent terrorist attacks, disrupt human trafficking networks, and identify security threats before they materialize. If there are fundamental flaws in its design, the public interest demands disclosure." "I agree completely," Sophia replied. "But I'm not a programmer. I'm not a whistleblower. I'm someone who cleaned houses for a living until 2 days ago when my world exploded." She leaned forward. "If you want my cooperation, stop treating me like a suspect and start treating me like what I am, someone trying to understand her mother's past." A subtle shift occurred in the room. Carson exchanged glances with the justice lawyer, then nodded slightly. "Fair enough," Carson said, his tone softening. "Here's what we know. Your mother, Lydia Reyes, was a pioneering developer of predictive algorithms. The core technology she created for Blackwood Reeves security solutions eventually became Project Oracle after significant modifications. Both Blackwood and Reeves acknowledged that she opposed these modifications on ethical grounds." Sophia nodded, having heard this much already. "What's less known," Carson continued, "is that several other programmers who worked on Oracle over the years attempted to implement similar ethical safeguards. All were overridden by management. All those programmers subsequently left the company, often under NDAs similar to your mother's." This was new information. "So this has been an ongoing issue?" "Exactly." Carson opened the folder he'd pushed across the table earlier, revealing photographs of various individuals. "These are the Oracle dissenters, as we've come to call them. Talented programmers who tried to build ethics into the system and were silenced." Sophia examined the photographs, recognizing something familiar in their expressions, the same quiet determination she'd often seen in her mother's eyes. "Meanwhile," Detective Walsh added, "we've connected 3 of Reeves's accomplices to individuals wrongfully flagged by Oracle's algorithms. One man's brother was detained for 3 weeks based on a false positive. Another lost his security clearance and subsequently his career." "So their attack wasn't just about revenge for Reeves," Sophia concluded. "It was personal for all of them." It appears so, Walsh confirmed. Andrea Kemp interjected. What exactly are you asking my client to do here? She has no technical expertise, no involvement in the development of this technology. Carson closed the folder. We're asking for her help in locating any materials her mother may have preserved related to the original ethical framework of the Oracle system, specifically the contents of that flash drive. Sophia weighed her options carefully. The flash drive was secure in a safety deposit box in Arizona, where she'd placed it years ago, along with her mother's few valuables. She could access it, but should she? And who could she trust with its contents? If such materials exist, she said slowly, what guarantee do I have that they would be used to implement the ethical safeguards my mother wanted, rather than just protect Blackwood or patch vulnerabilities without addressing the fundamental issues? Carson couldn't hide his reaction, a brief flash of calculation that confirmed Sophia's suspicions. Government agencies had their own interest in keeping Oracle functional, regardless of ethical concerns. Perhaps we could arrange a neutral third party to review any materials, the justice lawyer suggested. A respected academic institution, for instance. I'll consider it, Sophia said, neither committing nor refusing. The meeting concluded shortly after, with promises of follow-up conversations. As Sophia and Andrea left the federal building, a media presence awaited outside. The Blackwood Reeves controversy had exploded into a major tech ethics story overnight. Keep your head down, Andrea advised, guiding Sophia toward a waiting car. No comments to the press. Inside the vehicle, Sophia finally relaxed marginally. What happens now? Blackwood wants to meet, Andrea replied. Not at the estate. Too many eyes there now. He suggested a more private location. She handed Sophia a note with an address. He said you'd understand the significance. Sophia opened the note. The address was in the city, an area she wasn't familiar with. Below it, Blackwood had written, "Where it all began, 7 p.m. Come alone if you want the full truth." Do you know what this means? Sophia asked. Andrea shook her head. He didn't confide the details to me, but he seemed to think it would matter to you. After Andrea dropped her at a hotel Blackwood had arranged, a discreet establishment accustomed to protecting guests' privacy, Sophia spent the afternoon researching. First, she looked up the address from the note. It was an office building downtown, unremarkable from the outside, based on street view images. No obvious connection to Blackwood or her mother jumped out. She then delved deeper into Project Oracle, reading the growing number of news stories and academic critiques emerging in the wake of Reeves's allegations. The system was more pervasive than she'd realized, integrated into everything from border security to financial compliance systems. Its algorithms shaped lives in ways most people never recognized, determining who received additional screening, who faced audit, who appeared on watch lists. Just as her mother had feared. At 6:30 p.m., Sophia took a taxi to the address, maintaining awareness of her surroundings as she'd been trained to do. The building was older than it had appeared in photos, with a faded grandeur suggesting better days in the past. A security guard checked her ID and waved her through with a knowing nod. Blackwood had prepared for her arrival. The elevator carried her to the 12th floor, its dated panel and slow movement speaking to the building's age. When the doors opened, Sophia found herself in a corridor with offices that had clearly been recently renovated, contrasting with the building's exterior. At the end of the hall stood Elliot Blackwood, looking diminished in casual clothes, without his usual corporate armor. His injuries from the attack were healing, but still visible. "You came," he said simply. "Your note implied this place was significant." Blackwood gestured for her to follow him. "This is where Blackwood Reeves Security Solutions was born, our first real office after outgrowing my garage." He unlocked a door marked 1217. "We rented this space for 3 years. Your mother designed the original Oracle algorithm right here." Sophia stepped inside, finding a modern tech startup space. Open plan, minimalist furniture, large windows overlooking the city. Nothing remained of what must have existed 16 years ago. I bought the building 5 years ago, Blackwood explained, noting her observation. Sentiment, I suppose, or guilt. He moved to a wall panel and pressed what appeared to be an ordinary thermostat. A section of wall slid open, revealing a hidden room. This, however, I preserved exactly as it was. Sophia followed him into what had once been a private office. Unlike the renovated space outside, this room remained frozen in time, an early 2000s workspace with a clunky desktop computer, whiteboards covered in faded diagrams, and cork bulletin boards pinned with yellowing papers and photographs. "My mother worked here?" Sophia asked, running her fingers along the desk. "This was her space," Blackwood confirmed. "When we moved to larger offices, she insisted on keeping the furniture arrangement exactly the same, said it helped her think." Sophia examined the photographs on the bulletin board. Many showed her mother with Blackwood and Reeves, 3 young entrepreneurs full of ambition and hope. In several, her mother wore the flash drive necklace that had become so significant. "Why preserve this?" Sophia asked, "especially if you'd broken her trust so completely." Blackwood moved to the window, gazing out at the darkening city. "After she disappeared, I came here often, trying to understand where I'd gone wrong." He turned to face her. "I told you I regretted my actions, but I didn't tell you how deep that regret ran. I loved your mother, Sophia. Her departure, it broke something in me. Yet you still built an empire on the technology she tried to stop," Sophia noted coldly. "Yes." Blackwood didn't attempt to deny it. "I convinced myself I could implement her ethical concerns later, once we were established, that I could honor her vision while still achieving success." He sighed heavily. "Rationalization is a powerful drug. What changed? Why reach out to me now? Show me this place." Malcolm's attack was a wake-up call, literally and figuratively. Blackwood gestured to his healing injuries. "Seeing you defend me using skills I never knew you had, hearing you say your real name, it was like the past and present collided." He moved to the old computer and pressed the power button. Surprisingly, it hummed to life. "But more than that, I realized Malcolm was right about one thing. Oracle has evolved beyond our control. The ethical problems Lydia identified have only grown worse." The computer monitor displayed an ancient operating system loading screen. When it finished, Blackwood entered a long password. "This system has never been connected to the internet," he explained. "It contains the only complete copy of the original Oracle code, the version before we modified it to meet military specifications." Sophia stared at the screen, watching as directories and files appeared. "You kept it all this time. Insurance, initially," Blackwood admitted. "Then as technology evolved and Oracle became embedded in systems worldwide, I realized its value as a reset point, a way back to your mother's original vision." He stepped away from the computer. "I'm giving you access to everything. The original code, the documentation, the ethical framework Lydia designed, and the modifications we made that corrupted it." Sophia approached cautiously, suspicious of his sudden transparency. "Why give this to me? I'm not a programmer. I can't evaluate this." "Because you're her daughter," Blackwood said simply. "Because you have her moral compass, and because I suspect you have the missing piece. The flash drive." Blackwood nodded. "Lydia always wore it. Always. Even during intimate moments." A flash of pain crossed his face at the memory. "I used to tease her about it, but she would only say it contained her insurance policy. I believe it contains an encryption key, one that would unlock additional safeguards in the original code, safeguards even I never knew about." Sophia studied him, looking for signs of manipulation. "You could have taken the flash drive after she died. Your investigators knew where she was." "I considered it," Blackwood admitted, his honesty surprising her. "But it felt wrong. A final violation I couldn't bring myself to commit." He gestured to the computer. "This is me trying, belatedly, to do the right thing. To give you the power to decide what happens with your mother's legacy." Sophia moved to the computer, browsing through the files. The technical content meant little to her, but she recognized her mother's meticulous documentation style, the same way she had labeled household storage containers and written recipes. "The FBI wants the flash drive too," she said, not looking up from the screen. "I'm sure they do," Blackwood replied dryly, "along with every intelligence agency and tech company that relies on Oracle derivatives. But I'm not asking you to give it to me or to them. I'm asking you to use it as Lydia would have wanted, to enforce the ethical boundaries she tried to establish." Sophia turned to face him. "And you'd support that, even if it meant significant financial losses for your company, even if it meant admitting publicly that you knowingly deployed a flawed, potentially harmful system?" Blackwood held her gaze. "Yes." The simplicity of his answer caught her off guard. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I have nothing left to lose," he said quietly. "The board is already moving to replace me as CEO. Malcolm's allegations have triggered multiple investigations. My company, my reputation, they're already damaged beyond repair." "So this is about salvaging something from the wreckage," Sophia concluded. "No," Blackwood countered. "This is about finally doing what your mother asked me to do 16 years ago. This is about atonement." Sophia turned back to the computer, considering her options. If what Blackwood said was true, the combination of this original code and whatever was on her mother's flash drive could provide a blueprint for ethical AI frameworks, something increasingly valuable in a world dominated by algorithms making consequential decisions. "There's something else you should know," Blackwood said, breaking the silence. "About your mother, about why she was so adamant about Oracle's ethical implementation." Sophia looked up, curious despite herself. Before she became a programmer, Lydia worked briefly for a non-profit helping victims of domestic violence, women trying to rebuild their lives while avoiding abusive ex-partners. A chill ran down Sophia's spine. This was a connection she hadn't expected, the echo of her own history with the Phoenix program. She saw firsthand how systems meant to protect people could be weaponized against the vulnerable. Blackwood continued. How restraining orders and court documents could be used to track someone trying to disappear. When we began developing Oracle's predictive capabilities, she immediately recognized the potential dangers, how such a system could make disappearing nearly impossible for those who legitimately needed to. "Like she eventually did," Sophia murmured. "Like I did years later." Blackwood nodded solemnly. The ethical safeguards she built weren't abstract principles. They were personal, designed to prevent Oracle from ever becoming a tool to track those running from abuse, to ensure it couldn't override human judgment in cases where the system's predictions could endanger the vulnerable. Sophia thought of her own experience, how she had rebuilt her life after leaving her abusive ex-husband, how the Phoenix program had taught her not just self-defense, but how to disappear in a world of increasing digital surveillance. "She never told you about her work with domestic violence victims?" Sophia asked. "Only after we were engaged. It clearly shaped her thinking about technology and privacy." He paused. "I often wondered if that experience influenced her decision to disappear so completely after our confrontation." The pieces were finally coming together. Her mother's caution, her insistence on teaching Sophia to be self-reliant, the skills she had emphasized that later proved crucial when Sophia needed to escape her own abusive marriage. "I need time," Sophia said finally. "Time to process all this, to decide what to do with the flash drive." "Of course." Blackwood handed her a small device. "This is a secure copy of everything on this computer, encrypted, accessible only with a passphrase your mother would have chosen." He smiled faintly. "You knew her better than anyone. If anyone can figure it out, you can." As they left the preserved office, returning to the renovated space outside, Sophia felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Her mother's legacy, the future of a technology affecting millions of lives, the potential for redemption or further harm, all now rested partly in her hands. "What will you do now?" she asked Blackwood as they reached the elevator. Face the consequences of my choices, he replied simply. Testify truthfully about what happened with your mother, with Oracle's development, with Malcolm. He looked tired, but somehow unburdened. For the first time in 16 years, I feel like I'm doing what Lydia would have wanted. Outside, the evening had fully descended, the city lights glittering against the dark sky. As they parted ways, Blackwood to his waiting car, Sophia choosing to walk briefly to clear her head, she felt a strange sense of closure beginning to form. Her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Walsh. Reeves talking, filling in gaps about Oracle's history. Says he wants to make things right too. Mentioned the Phoenix Protocol. Mean anything to you? Sophia stopped walking abruptly. The Phoenix Protocol. Not the Phoenix program she had attended years later, but something with the same name. A connection she hadn't anticipated. Another text arrived, this one from an unknown number. Your mother's work protected people like us. We've been waiting for you. When you're ready, bring the key. We'll finish what she started. As pedestrians flowed around her on the busy sidewalk, Sophia clutched the secure drive Blackwood had given her. The final chapter of this story was still unwritten, and it appeared that her mother had established a contingency plan long ago, one that was only now being activated. The invisible woman had stepped into the light, and the code she had inherited was about to change everything. The safety deposit box looked exactly as Sophia had left it 3 years earlier. Small, unremarkable, tucked in the corner of a modest bank in Phoenix, Arizona. The irony of the location's name hadn't escaped her when she'd chosen it, a subtle nod to the program that had saved her life after her divorce. Now she understood there might have been another layer to that coincidence. The bank manager smiled politely as she unlocked her side of the box. It's been a while, Ms. Martinez. Yes, it has, Sophia replied, not correcting the use of her former surname. Here, in this place where she had established her post-divorce identity, she was still Sophia Martinez. Left alone in the viewing room, she opened the metal container. Inside lay the few precious items she'd preserved from her mother's life. A small jewelry box containing her grandmother's pearl earrings, a handwritten book of family recipes, several photographs in protective sleeves, and a sealed envelope containing her mother's final letter to her. And there, nestled among these treasures, was the flash drive pendant on its silver chain. Sophia lifted it carefully. The device looked deceptively ordinary, a slim metal rectangle no larger than her thumbnail, with a small USB connector that slid out from one end. It had the weight of sterling silver, cool against her palm. For years, she had kept it as a memento, never thinking to check its contents. Now it might hold the key to completing what her mother had started 16 years ago. Sophia secured the pendant around her neck and returned the remaining items to the box. Whatever came next, she wanted her mother's presence with her. Outside the bank, a sleek black car idled at the curb, the same vehicle that had followed her from the coffee shop 2 days earlier. This time, Sophia approached it directly, the window lowered to reveal Agent Carson's expressionless face. "You're a long way from Connecticut, Agent," Sophia said calmly. "As are you, Ms. Reyes." He gestured to the passenger seat. "May I offer you a ride? Depends on the destination. Wherever you were planning to go next," Carson replied smoothly. "I'm here to observe, not interfere, for now." Sophia considered her options. Refusing might provoke a more aggressive approach. Accepting might give her insights into exactly what the government knew and wanted. Fine. She opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. "But I choose the destination." Carson nodded to the driver, who remained silent. "Of course. The Phoenix Institute for Information Ethics," Sophia instructed, "on Camelback Road." If Carson was surprised by her choice, he hid it well. An interesting selection. It seemed appropriate, given recent developments. The car pulled smoothly into traffic. Phoenix spread around them, a city of sharp angles and desert hues, so different from the snowy Connecticut landscape she'd left behind. "How did you know I'd come here?" Sophia asked. "Your mother established a pattern," Carson replied. "When she needed to access something important, she returned to places with personal significance. We assumed you might do the same. We? Various interested parties, Carson said vaguely. The situation with Project Oracle has created unlikely alliances. You mean the FBI is working with Blackwood or with Reeves? I mean that when a core piece of national security infrastructure is potentially compromised, traditional boundaries become flexible. Carson turned to study her profile. You have it, don't you? The key your mother protected. Sophia touched the pendant beneath her blouse. I have memories of my mother. Beyond that, I'm not sure what I have. Carson accepted the non-answer with a slight nod. The Phoenix Protocol, he said after a moment. That's what Reeves called it. Your mother's fail-safe system. Do you know what it is? I'm hoping to find out, Sophia answered honestly. The Phoenix Institute appeared ahead, a low, modern building of sandstone and glass. As the car pulled into the parking lot, Sophia noticed several other vehicles already waiting, including a familiar town car with Connecticut plates. It seems others had the same idea, Carson observed. Inside the Institute's lobby, a receptionist directed them to Conference Room 3 without Sophia even stating her purpose. Someone was expecting her. The room was arranged like a small amphitheater, with tiered seating facing a central presentation area. Several people were already present, Blackwood sitting alone in one corner, Malcolm Reeves under guard in another. Detective Walsh stood near the door, eyebrows raising slightly at Sophia's arrival with Carson. But it was the group seated at the central table that caught Sophia's attention. 5 individuals of varying ages, all watching her with expressions of quiet recognition. Ms. Reyes, the eldest among them, greeted her, rising from his seat. With grey hair and wire-rimmed glasses, he projected an academic air. I'm Dr. Joseph Chen. I worked with your mother on the original Oracle architecture. You're one of the Oracle dissenters, Sophia realized, recognizing him from the FBI's photographs. The first of many, Chen confirmed. He gestured to the others at the table. We're what remains of the Phoenix Protocol team. Programmers and ethicists who shared your mother's concerns about predictive algorithms and their potential for misuse. Sophia glanced around the room, assessing the situation. Quite a gathering. I wasn't aware I'd called a meeting. You didn't, a woman at the table replied. The protocol did. When you accessed your mother's safety deposit box, it triggered an alert in our system. Sophia's hand went instinctively to the pendant. How is that possible? RFID technology embedded in the pendant, Chen explained. Dormant until activated by proximity to the bank's specific location. Your mother was thorough. Blackwood approached cautiously, keeping his distance from Reeves. Sophia, I didn't know this would happen. I suspected the flash drive was important, but this... None of us knew the full extent of Lydia's contingency plan, Chen interjected. She compartmentalized information deliberately, ensuring no single person could compromise the protocol. Sophia took a seat at the table, processing this development. So the Phoenix program for domestic violence survivors, was that connected too? Chen nodded. An offshoot of our work here. Your mother helped design their security protocols, their methods for helping people disappear from digital surveillance. The coincidence that had saved Sophia's life after her divorce hadn't been coincidence at all. It had been her mother's legacy working as intended, protecting the vulnerable in ways Sophia hadn't recognized until now. Why am I here? Sophia asked. What does this protocol need from me? Authentication, Chen replied simply. The final failsafe requires your biometric confirmation, DNA that matches Lydia's, plus the encryption key stored on that pendant. Sophia looked around at the assembled group, government agents, tech billionaires, programmers, and law enforcement, all drawn together by her mother's code, by the ethical framework she had fought to preserve. And what happens then? She asked. What does the protocol actually do? Chen exchanged glances with his colleagues. It doesn't destroy Oracle, if that's what you're asking. Your mother understood the system's potential benefits too well for that. It implements guardrails, one of the younger programmers explained. Ethical boundaries that cannot be overridden, transparency requirements that cannot be circumvented, accountability mechanisms that cannot be disabled. In practical terms, Chen continued, it would prevent Oracle from being used for preemptive action, based solely on algorithmic prediction. It would require human review of all flagged cases. It would mandate disclosure of false positive rates and regular auditing by independent experts. All the things my mother wanted 16 years ago, Sophia observed. All the things I should have implemented from the beginning, Blackwood added quietly from where he stood. Reeves stirred in his corner. All the things both of us ignored in favor of profit and growth, he corrected, addressing Blackwood directly. I'm as guilty as you are, Elliot. I just recognized it sooner. Agent Carson stepped forward. This is all very touching, but there are national security implications that cannot be ignored. Oracle is integrated into critical systems. Any modification risks disruption. The protocol accounts for that, Chen interrupted calmly. Implementation occurs gradually, without system interruption. Your operations continue, but with enhanced ethical oversight. Detective Walsh joined the conversation. And what about accountability for past misuse? For the people whose lives were damaged by false positives, by algorithmic bias, by overzealous enforcement? That's beyond the scope of the protocol itself, Chen admitted. But part of its implementation includes a review mechanism for past cases, a pathway to redress for those wrongfully impacted. So Sophia absorbed this information, weighing the responsibility before her. And if I refuse, if I decide not to activate this protocol, then nothing changes, Chen said simply. Oracle continues as it exists today, with all its flaws and vulnerabilities. The ethical framework remains dormant. He smiled sadly. Your mother believed in free will, Sophia. The choice must be yours. Sophia touched the pendant, feeling its weight against her skin. Why me? Why not build this authentication around someone with technical expertise? Because she trusted you, Blackwood said softly. Even before you were born, she must have known what kind of person you would become. Sophia met his gaze, seeing genuine emotion there. You knew about this possibility. I suspected, he admitted, not the details, but I knew Lydia would have created a contingency plan. It was how her mind worked, always 3 steps ahead. Sophia turned her attention back to Chen and the protocol team. I want to understand exactly what this does before I make any decision. Walk me through it. The technical details, the ethical framework, the implementation plan, everything. Of course, Chen agreed. That's why we're here. For the next hour, Chen and his team presented the protocol in detail, displaying code on large screens, explaining the ethical algorithms Lydia had designed, demonstrating how the system would function once activated. Sophia listened intently, asking pointed questions despite her limited technical background. Throughout the presentation, she observed the reactions of the others in the room. Blackwood watched, with what appeared to be genuine remorse and admiration for Lydia's foresight. Reeves nodded frequently, occasionally offering clarifications about Oracle's current architecture. Carson remained stone-faced but attentive, while Walsh took detailed notes. When the presentation concluded, Sophia stood and walked to the center of the room. Before I decide, she said, I want to hear from everyone. Why should I activate this protocol? Or why shouldn't I? She turned to Blackwood. You first. Blackwood straightened, meeting her gaze directly. You should activate it because your mother was right, because I was wrong, because technology without ethical boundaries becomes a weapon regardless of our intentions. He paused. And because I've spent 16 years regretting that I didn't listen to her when I had the chance. Sophia nodded and turned to Reeves. Your turn. Activate it, Reeves said without hesitation. Not for redemption, it's too late for that, but because the alternative is continuing to harm innocent people through a system that prioritizes efficiency over humanity. He glanced at Blackwood. We both built something monstrous. This is a chance to tame it. Agent Carson spoke next, without waiting to be called on. The security implications are significant. Modifications to core infrastructure carry inherent risks. However, he added, seeming to choose his words carefully, the current system has demonstrated concerning false positive rates that undermine its effectiveness. Refinement may ultimately strengthen national security rather than compromise it. Walsh offered her perspective as a detective. I've seen both sides of predictive policing, the legitimate leads it can generate and the devastating impact of false flags on innocent lives. Any system that reduces the latter while preserving the former deserves implementation. Finally, Sophia turned to Chen. And you've protected this protocol for years. What do you believe? I believe Lydia knew this day would come, Chen replied simply, that eventually the ethical question she raised would become too urgent to ignore. This isn't about technology, it's about humanity's relationship with the systems we create. He smiled gently, but as I said, the choice must be yours. Sophia closed her eyes briefly, centering herself as she'd learned to do years ago. When she opened them, her decision was made. My mother spent her career trying to ensure that technology served humanity, not the other way around, she said. She understood that algorithms, no matter how sophisticated, cannot replace human judgment, human compassion, human responsibility. Sophia touched the pendant at her neck. I'll activate the protocol, not just for her legacy, but for all the lives touched by this technology, past, present, and future. And Chen nodded and gestured to a sleek device on the conference table. Then it's time. Sophia removed the pendant and inserted it into the waiting port. The screen before them came to life, displaying a prompt for biometric verification. She pressed her palm against the scanner as instructed. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then the screen changed, displaying a simple message. Phoenix Protocol initiated. Authentication confirmed. Welcome, daughter of Lydia. The room remained silent as progress bars appeared, showing the protocol's initial security checks and deployment preparations. After what seemed like an eternity, the system displayed ethical framework integration beginning, estimated completion, 72 hours. It's done, Chen said quietly. The protocol is active and cannot be reversed. Sophia felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the burden of decision giving way to a sense of completion. Her mother's final safeguard, dormant for 16 years, was now fulfilling its purpose. What happens now? She asked Chen. Now the real work begins, he replied. Implementing the ethical framework, reviewing past cases, building the transparency systems your mother envisioned. He gestured to his team. We've prepared for this moment for years. We're ready. Blackwood approached Sophia cautiously. Thank you, he said simply, for doing what I should have done long ago. I didn't do it for you, Sophia replied, but without rancor. I did it because it was right. As the others began discussing implementation details, Sophia stepped away, finding a quiet corner of the room. She removed her mother's final letter from her pocket, the one she'd retrieved from the safety deposit box alongside the pendant. The envelope had remained sealed since her mother's death. Sophia had never found the right moment to open it, to read those last words. Now, surrounded by the culmination of her mother's life's work, it seemed fitting. She broke the seal carefully and unfolded the single page inside. Her mother's handwriting, familiar and precious, filled the page. My dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, then you've discovered the truth about my work, about Oracle, about the choices I made to protect what I believed in. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything while I was alive. Some secrets are too dangerous to share, even with those we love most. The pendant you've worn since my passing is more than a memento. It contains the key to implementing safeguards I designed years ago, ethical boundaries that couldn't be circumvented or overridden by those who placed profit above principle. I don't know what circumstances led you to discover this truth. I don't know what role Elliot might have played in your journey, but I do know this. You have always possessed the strength and moral clarity I sometimes lacked. Whatever choice you've made regarding the protocol, I trust it completely. My work in technology was important, but you were always my greatest creation, my most perfect algorithm, a human being whose compassion and courage could never be replicated by code. Remember that technology is neither good nor evil. It simply amplifies human intention. My hope is that the Phoenix Protocol amplifies the best of our humanity, not the worst of our fears. With endless love and complete faith in you, Mom Sophia carefully refolded the letter, tears blurring her vision. In the center of the room, technicians were now connecting to Oracle's systems, beginning the careful integration of her mother's ethical framework. Blackwood and Reeves, once partners turned adversaries, stood side by side watching the process unfold, their rivalry giving way to a shared responsibility for what they had created. Agent Carson conferred quietly with his colleagues, while Detective Walsh approached Sophia with a quiet respect that hadn't been present in their earlier interactions. "Your mother would be proud," Walsh said simply. Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. Outside the windows of the Phoenix Institute, the Arizona sun cast long afternoon shadows across the desert landscape. A world increasingly shaped by algorithms continued its rhythms, unaware that one of its most influential systems was being fundamentally transformed from within. The invisible woman, the maid who had moved unnoticed through a billionaire's mansion for 3 years, had completed her most important cleaning job yet. Not with polish and persistence, but with the inheritance her mother had preserved for her, the courage to stand for what was right, the skill to protect the vulnerable, and the wisdom to recognize that true power lay not in control, but in establishing ethical boundaries that even the most brilliant technology must respect. As the Phoenix Protocol came to life across digital networks worldwide, Sophia Reyes stood in quiet witness to her mother's final triumph, a legacy not of wealth or fame, but of integrity sustained against all odds, protecting countless invisible people she would never meet. Some inheritances were measured in dollars and property, others in lines of code and moral courage. Sophia had received the richer portion,